In this video, we cover V-Ray Ies Light. Ies Light is a photometric light that contains the distribution profile for the light by manufacturers. So basically, using this light type, you can resemble lighting fixtures and produce complex distribution patterns without having to model the fixture or, the lamp itself. Notice I have these recessed lights in the ceiling, and what we are trying to do is to create our Ies Light based on the position of those recessed lights, so right under them. You can add an Ies Light right from the Create panel. This time, let's use V-Ray toolbar. So click on this V-Ray Ies Light icon, and in the front view, we can add our first Ies Light. I'm gonna try to put the light just slightly under the lamp and drag to create its target, basically where the Ies Light is going to point at. Now select the light and its target, and in the top view, make sure they are right under the recessed light. Select the light itself, and in the Modify panel, the first thing you need to do is to define the IES file or that specific distribution pattern of light that you are interested in. So click on this button to define the IES file. Now you can simply Google IES files and download thousands of free IES files from manufacturers' websites and use a simple software like Photometric Viewer to actually see how they look before using them in V-Ray. In this case, I have provided two IES files that you can find in your project files folder, Scene Assets and Photometric folder. For starters, let's use this complex IES file, which, as the name suggests, it has a bit more complex distribution pattern compared to the simple one here. Now, before starting the render for a faster feedback, I'm going to override all the materials in the scene with a simple default V-Ray gray material. And to do that, in the render settings, go to the V-Ray tab and come down to the global switches section, enable override material. Then click on this None button and add a V-Ray material as the material to override all the other materials in the scene. Now let me start the IPR. And you can do that right from the V-Ray toolbar if you click and hold this render button and then choose the IPR mode. You see we get this very nice and intricate light distribution pattern thanks to the IES file. First of all, I can select the light and point it at any direction that I want. If I select the light itself, we can take a look at its options. Most of the options here are identical to a normal V-Ray light. The UI is a bit different, which is a weakness in the design, honestly. You can change the color or the overall intensity of the light down here. Maybe we can try a few colors. Or change the mode to temperature. And maybe try a few different Kelvin values. For now, let's go for a simple white color. To control the overall intensity of the light, there are two units, lumens and candela, and you can decide which one you are more comfortable with. It really doesn't matter that much. Now let me quickly take a look at some of these shape options in this mid section, which relates to how the cast shadows from this light look. Let me just add a small sphere above the floor, right under the light. Right now you notice the IES light casts this sharp shadow. If you are interested in a more diffuser shadow, simply enable this override shape option and change the shape from point to anything like a rectangle or a sphere. And let's go for a sphere. And if you increase the diameter to, let's say, around 100 centimeters, now you get a much softer shadow. And this works because this Use Light Shape option is set to foreshadows. If it is set to none, V-Ray will consider it as a simple point light for its shadow calculations. For now, let's disable Override Shape and hide the sphere. You can also use these rotation parameters to rotate the light around without rotating it in the viewport. For example, let's rotate it for like 15 degrees on X. I'll set it back to 0. The rest of the parameters are the same as any other Virial light, like cast shadows, effect diffuse, or specular, and the rest. For now, let's quickly move on and finish the lighting of the scene. So let me select the Ies Light and its target and start instancing it in the scene under the recessed lights. Also, let's use that simple IES profile instead of the complex one. Now, the scene also has these 3 sphere lights that act as simple ceiling lights. They are around 15 centimeters in radius and have an intensity of around 50 watts. Let's turn them on as well. Cool. And finally, we can disable override materials in the render settings and get back to our actual materials. You notice the recessed lights themselves have a simple Virial light material applied to them. We'll learn how to do that in the previous lesson if you remember. Now we can stop the IPR. For the final render, let me lock the image aspect ratio and go for a 1500 by 2000 render. Decrease the noise threshold to 0.00, probably 5, or you can go a bit higher actually. And as always, add a vary the noise render element and start the final render. Now remember, we are using Aces as our color manager. Now, as this is a fairly big render, it will take a few minutes, so I'm gonna stop the render to show you the final render that I have already saved out in the history panel. Also, to add your render to the history panel, simply click on this green plus icon, and here is our render. I rendered it for like 90 passes and stopped the render, and with the denoising layer we get a perfect clean render. We can also turn on bloom and glare for the self-illuminated recessed lights as well. Okay, that's a nice render. So in this video we learned about IES lights. See you in the next one.